And we're doing the second part of Jonah, which we began last week. And this week it's entitled "The Man Overboard" for obvious reasons. But if you'll stay with me today, you'll really grasp some tremendous things for your life and for your mind and in the realm of the life that you're living today, as set forth in this little myth called Jonah and the Whale, as we commonly know it as Jonah and the Whale. But you know, I guess it was Lorraine Benson was telling, there was a program on TV the other night, and people are looking for Noah's Ark again, you know. And that's scary. It's really scary, simply because, you know, we never caught the fact that these are myths. They're allegorical tone poems, kind of, if you would. They never really happened. And they're written so bizarre that they think any normal, you know, person would know they didn't happen. So it shows you the state that we're in, because this is the foundation of our whole moral life, that these things really happened. They didn't. And in the same thing with Jonah. Okay. So what we got to last week in understanding was that word Jonah, which means dove, is the representation of our divine spirit. And the crew of the ship are the thoughts, you know, that come into our minds. And we know that we're not looking at a story. Nobody ever claims that, you know, this happened. It didn't happen. There was no man swallowed by a fish and residing in the intestines of a fish for 3 days, and then when the fish, you know, got a virus and threw up, out, you know, comes this minister. I mean, you know, it's how could we even think of such incredible nonsense like that? So it's given in such a way that nobody would ever, the ancients never conceived that you would take this seriously, but that you would look deep within the allegory and try to understand that here is this deep spirit, which specifically says, you know, I must be cast into the sea, into that sea of forgetfulness, into nothingness, and yet the crew or your thoughts are continuing to row and to row and to row. In other words, to continue to try to do this our own way, rather than, like I said before, stopping your attempts and reacting to the things that happen through spirit. Let's go to page 751. And here's the thing is, the storm is all over the ship, but of course the ship is you. Remember, whenever you see that word in the Bible, that word ship means you. Okay, it's used to indicate you, your life, your ego, your personality, your direction. That's the ship. And here's the ships being tossed by every storm imaginable. Back for your information, Joan and I went down to AC to see Dave, and he's preaching down there. He's not moving his bottom legs, but boy, he's moving everything else, and he's in charge. He's banging on the thing, and you know, he's doing very, very well. But of course, you know, the storm has raged around him. And indeed, he's practicing what's been preached here, and he's making tremendous progress. And so it says here in Jonah chapter 1, verse 11, the crew says, what shall we do so that they'll be calm? And this is the key, 1:12, okay? And Jonah says, take me and cast me forth into the sea. See? In other words, the storm will be calmed only when your spirit, remember dove, Jonah, dove means spirit. The storm of your life will be calmed only when your spirit is cast into that deep sea, which means forgetfulness, nothingness. We were talking earlier, ABC television, okay, Friday night, gave 25 minutes to a half hour on one subject, meditation, calming the storm. This is exactly what this is about. Calming the storm. There are doctors and hospitals all over the country, all over the world, ABC television showed, where they're setting up meditation rooms in hospitals to calm the storm, because doctors are finally realizing that the people of the East knew something that we didn't know. There is something that happens in meditation that calms the storm and helps the healing process. They said, we're not exactly sure how it works, but nonetheless, we're positive that it does work, because the results are starting to come in from all over the country and all over the world, what happens in meditation. Meditation is drawn by this story of Jonah, that when you take your spirit, that dove, okay, and throw it into the sea of forgetfulness, which is the meditative spirit of no thought, then there will be calm. And that's exactly what's said here. Cast me into the deep sea. Take your spirit, the dove, and cast it into that deep sea of meditational forgetfulness, and there will be a calm that will come into that total nothingness. But even after we know better, you know, and we do, and I do it, and you do it, and we all do it, we know that it's meditation, we know that we have to take ourselves deep into this holy place of nothingness, but what do? Look at Jonah 1, verse 13. What's it say? Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring it to land, but they couldn't. The mind continues to do the same thing. I mean, you have a situation here. I mean, just think of this. Just think of this, all right? Here you have a situation which occurred on this last Tuesday evening in this little insignificant place under a beauty parlor in Forked River, of all places. And you had a visitation, a movement of a light being actually enter into this room and do things with the sound and so forth, and bring an odor of flower. I mean, you know, there is something so totally real that's going on in here. So totally real. And yet it's still hard for people, because you know, most people don't come because we're busy. You know, we got to do this, we got to do that, and that's fine. That, I understand. But the point that's being tried to be expressed here is, even though you're told what to do, it's difficult to give up, you know, your control, and you're going to go ahead and meditate. So, nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring. So next, here we come to the point where we're at our wits' end. This is the point when it gets to where you know that your rowing is not going well, and actually you're rowing this way, but you're going that way. We can't really, get into anything. What choice do we have? So now we throw our spirit. Jonah's got to go. The dove, the spirit within us. We take that human spirit, and in this deep meditation, because we don't know what else to do, we're backed up against the wall, we take it and we cast it into that sea of nothingness. We separate from the thoughts of the mind. We've got to allow our spirit to sink into that total nothingness. So look what happens in Jonah 1, verse 15. So they took up Jonah, cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. I want you to see something. What ceased from her? The sea ceased from her raging. Do you notice that? You know what that means? Your emotions are what are drowning you. Your emotions are what are banging at the sides of your ship. Always her. Whenever you see that, female in the Bible is one of two things. It's either spirit or it's emotions. And in this particular case, the sea ceased from her ragings when the spirit was cast into her midst. See? And so then all of a sudden, there's a calm. Now, come on. I mean, you know doggone well by throwing some guy overboard, you're not going to, But so something beautiful is being said here, isn't it? The emotional tirades that have come against your health, against your family, against your job, against your opportunities, they're calmed because you have cast your spirit deep into the center of that raging sea. See? Notice the sea ceased from her ragings when the spirit leaves the ship. Ah! Do you hear what I said? The sea, that emotional nature, raged and raged and raged until something happened. Your spirit left the ship. Let's see what we say. Go to page 945 and let me show you something. I'll show you what this is, your spirit leaving the ship. What you've just seen, look at it. You got your finger where you are? Okay. Where it says there in 15, they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea. The sea ceased from her raging. What you're seeing in metaphysical terminology, ancient allegorical, is a description of an out-of-body experience. Okay. Your spirit is no longer on the ship. You have separated from the body. You've entered into the deep sea. And look what it says on page 945. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And here's the Apostle Paul. Go to verse 6. Okay? Therefore, we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. While we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. While you are on your ship and you are rowing your ship is going to flounder on the rocks. Something's going to happen. Now let's go on to verse 7. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Do you see that? And look at verse 8. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Cast your spirit overboard. Cast your spirit off of the ship of your carnal life and let it sink into the abyss of God's total nothingness, and the storms that surround you and your family will cease. There will be a calm. See, when Jonah leaves the ship, that's simply saying that's an out-of-body experience. When your spirit leaves the body, that's Jonah leaving the ship. Okay? That's Jonah leaving the ship and being absent from the body, being present with the Lord. The raging seas of your emotional nature, are calmed. Because there is no emotions when you sink into that deep abyss of the sea. There is no emotions to challenge you in nothingness when you separate from thought. Now look at Jonah chapter 1, verse 16 on page 751. The men, that's your mind, feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice unto the Lord and made what? Vows. Okay? That's an important word to look at. The vow in mysticism is to separate from human thought. To separate from thought. And so here's the vow. This is symbolized basically in all ancient tales. That vow is made by cutting hair. That's what they used to do. They used to cut their hair and shave their heads, and that was the vow, that they were no longer dependent on what grew out of the mind, what grew out of the intellect, what grew out of the brain. So they would shave their heads, and you see the monks to this day, you know, monks are bald because they've shaved their head. They've cut away that which grows out of the higher or that which grows out of the mind. Let me show you something interesting. Go to page 907 in the Bible. Look at the book of Acts. Page 907. Okay? And look at Acts chapter 18. We're looking at the Apostle Paul. Okay? Chapter 18. Acts chapter 18 and verse 18. Look what it says about the Apostle Paul. And Paul, after this, tarried there a while, and then took his leave of the brethren, blah, 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 and sailed with Priscilla and Aquila, having shorn his head in Cenchrea, for he had a vow. Do you see what he did? What did he do? He cut his hair. He cut his hair because hair to the mystic symbolized that which are the thoughts growing out of the mind. He cut it off. And he's saying he's going to be absent from the body and present with the Lord. And he demonstrates that by shaving his hair off. I am no longer dependent on that which grows out of me. I am dependent on that which grows out of God. See what he did? I'll show you something else. It's interesting. That's page 907. Go to page 911. And look at Acts chapter 21. These are the disciples of the Apostle Paul. If you were to be a quote-unquote born-again Christian and follow the Apostle Paul and all of his biblical rhetoric, what happens to you? Look at Acts chapter 21 on page 911 and go to verse 24. Okay. What's verse 23? We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Do you see that? Take them and purify yourself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that these things were formed concerning thee. So blah, 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 blah. And so here then the Apostle Paul takes his disciples, shaves their heads, and you know, for all the intents and purposes, here you have them walking down the street with their orange robes and their flowers in their hands and their bald heads, and you know. Nothing like you've been led to think, has it? And so a vow has been made. Okay? We're still taking it. Well, clean it out. Ah. Yeah. So in Jonah then, the vow of the crew is here you've reached a point. You see what's happened? You've gone through a struggle of the soul. Your ship has been churning and turned to and fro from whatever it is, and so now you've come into meditation, you've allowed your spirit to go into that deep sea of nothingness, you've separated from the thoughts of the mind, you're in an out-of-body experience, and you're making a vow that you are no longer going to be dependent upon the things of yourself, but you're going to wait and react to these magnificent things that are happening, which we call the new age of God. And look here's the part of the story you've all grown to love in your Sunday schools. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. You have to immediately say, what does this mean? 3 days, yet 72 hours in the intestines of a fish. Can you imagine this? I mean, just think of this. And do you know that most of the people in religious circles actually believe that this literally happened? And then you wonder why the world is screwed up. You see? In the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights. That word fish in mysticism means God and divine thought. Fish is divine thought. Fish is God. So the fish is a symbol of God, and in the depths of the sea of nothingness, you are actually devoured, you are swallowed by that personality of God. No longer are you floundering trying to figure out. You have subdued this. You have cast your spirit away from your body. Your spirit has left the body, entered into God's deep sea, and now you are swallowed by God. This is a beautiful, and I'll tell you something. When we get done here, just at the very end of this, there's a message in here for all fundamentalists. There's a message in here for all Christianity, which totally turns upside down and destroys the basis of their whole philosophy. Right here on this stage, we're going to do it today. See, Al said he's going to start teaching on Friday nights on the Kabbalah. You should come. Because you should learn about the Kabbalah. You know what the Kabbalah says? He, God, has his dwelling in the great sea, and is a fish therein. Huh? Who? God. He, God, has his dwelling in the great sea, and is a fish therein. You're swallowed by a fish. The fish is the great God. And as we enter into meditation and separate from the physical, we encounter the fish, and we are in 3 days and 3 nights, and that number 3 means resurrection, new life, something different, something changed, something's going to change you. When I look at Dave Preston, when I went down and looked at Dave Preston, and we held hands and we meditated, we had a pretty good meditation. It was really good. And Joan had some, I let her hold his hand because vibrations and sparks and all that. But I looked at that man and I said to Dave, if you didn't know this, what would have ever happened to you? How could you have ever fought this thing? Couldn't have. Couldn't have. And in Matthew 12:40, you know what Jesus, see, so what do you want? You want to be swallowed by the fish, don't you? Isn't that what you're here for? To be swallowed by the fish. To be consumed in that deep sea, so that like Jonah, you can be released from that encounter with that inner fish of meditation and be able to stride forth and help set the record straight. Right there. You know what this is all about, this story? What this story is all about is God directing you to teach people that the destruction must come upon their fourfold nature. And then you and I say, well, I don't know if I want to get involved in this. And then finally, in our own troubles, we cast ourselves into the sea, and then we change. When we come out, we're different people. Now we really want to tell people. There's a real catch to this story, though. There's a really ironic ending to it. But we'll get to it. But so there's going to be a resurrection. When Jesus Christ said, you want a miracle, don't you? You want to see something, don't you? You want to feel something in your life. You want to change in your life, don't you? See what Jesus Christ said. Go to page 788. Matthew chapter 12. Page 788. Matthew chapter 12. And look at verse 40. Well, look at verse 39. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there will be no sign given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. There's your sign. There's your miracle. There's what you can do. There's the sign. To cast your spirit into that deep sea of meditational forgetfulness and nothingness, and there be swallowed by the great fish who is in that deep sea, who is God. That's your sign. In the tomb, in the fish, we're in the center of God, and there'll be a resurrection. First, what are you looking for? You're looking for fish. Do you want fish? You want to be swallowed? Where's the fish? Let's find out where the fish is. Go to page 886. And look at the book of John. Page 886. The book of John. John chapter 21. Look at verse 6. Everybody's fishing, but they're not catching any fish. You see what I'm saying? We're all fishing, and we've all had our hooks in the sea and all kinds, and we've had Methodist hooks and Baptist hooks and Mormon hooks and Buddhist hooks, and we've all had our hooks in the sea, and we're pulling up hooks and we're pulling up hooks and we're not getting any fish. And he comes walking down, and in John 21:6 he says, cast your net on the right side of the ship, and you will find. Huh? Cast your net on the right side of the ship. Start thinking laterally. Start directing your energy to the right hemisphere of the brain, and you'll find fish. Divine thought. And how many did we find? John chapter 21:11. They drew the net to the land, 153 fish. See that? 9, the number of divine consciousness. There it is for you. It's laid out for you. Huh? Now we come to the point of resurrection. We have abandoned our oars and our trials. We no longer struggle to survive. We wait in the depths of meditation in the great fish, which is God. And Jonah prays. And this is our spirit, which speaks from the center of meditation. Okay? Let's go. You're now safe in the center of the fish. You're now safe in the center of meditation. Because you cried out in your despair of your life, of your illness, of your family, whatever it was, you cried out in your despair, just for the fact that you're alive and you don't know why you're alive and what you're doing, you don't want to do it anymore. You cried out in your despair, and you were swallowed by this great fish in this deep sea of meditation. And look what it says in Jonah chapter 2, verse 2. And he said, I cried by reason of my affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me out of the belly of hell. The belly of hell is your lower mind. Huh? The lower mind that has caused all of your problems and has caused the problems of the world. Out of that place he heard you. Out of that place he heard you. He heard your voice. And look what it says in verse 3. For you had cast me into the deep. That's meditation. Into the midst of the seas. Into the center of all of your emotions. Into the center of all of your fears. Into the center of all of your hurts and all of your illnesses. There in the very center. The floods compassed about me. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. You were totally saturated and drenched and overwhelmed by this tremendous mystical experience of which so much of the world is finding out today. Do you know what I'm telling you? We've sat in this little room, most of us together, and we've seen people come and we've seen people go. The building's been attacked, and all of this crazy stuff has happened. And people have told you, oh, don't go there. But some reason, every time you turn the television on, and on these big television networks and all over, people are finding that the same message is true. And is lifting people, and saving people, and healing people, and making things right. And then verse 4, Jonah said, and I said, I am cast out of your sight, yet will I look again towards thy holy temple, to the right side. The waters compassed me about even to the soul. The depths closed about me. The weeds were wrapped around my head. I was totally drenched in the deepest sea where God's growth just completely overwhelmed me. I'm in meditation now. I'm in nothingness. I'm in Om. Huh? Verse 6, I went down to the bottom of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. In other words, we didn't have any hope. We sunk as low as we could be. We were strangled with the emotions of the lower mind. But look what happened in verse 6. But you have brought me up my life from corruption, O Lord, my God. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came into thee, into thine holy temple, inside of us. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy, but I will sacrifice unto thee. Watch it. With the voice of thanksgiving, I will pay that I have vowed. In other words, I will tithe. I will give that left side. I will give that left side. I will tithe the 10%. Don't you see what he just said? I will pay. What's he going to pay? He's in the intestines of a barracuda somewhere. What the heck's he going to pay? Where's he got? He's got seaweed. Seaweed in his ears, seaweed in his mouth. Intestinal juices of the fish have eaten his T-shirt off. That's silly. But he says, I will pay. In other words, I will give the 10%. I will give the left side. I will give the thoughts of the mind. And I will be at peace with the Lord, my God. And what happened then? Once you decided, once you've committed yourself, you've cast your spirit into that deep sea of forgetfulness, your spirit has been consumed by the fish in that nothingness of meditation as you rock back and forth with Om, Om, Om comes over you like a wave here, Om, Om. And once you then finally have made up your mind and you say, this is my life, this is my direction, I will pay what I owe, I will give you that 10%, I will give you the left side. In verse 10 it says, and the Lord spoke unto the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. You're released now. Go forth and do what I told you to do. Go forth and do what I told you to do. The stone was rolled away, and out came Jesus. The fish was rolled away, and out came Jonah. The crisis is rolled away, and out comes you. Now, we get to an interesting part as we wrap up our study of Jonah. In chapter 3, Jonah heads for Nineveh. Now, what's happening here? He's saved. Now, hey, look it, folks. You know, here we start to address the church. Here we start to address religion. You know, he's going to Nineveh. He's going to the big city. And what's he going to do in the big city? Verse 4, chapter 3. Jonah arose, and Jonah began to enter into the city, and he cried, 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. You know what he's saying? I'm a religious guy. I'm a spiritual guy. And I'm looking at the world, and you're going to be destroyed. You know who's a latter-day Jonah? Jack Van Impe. Did you ever see him on television?
Yeah.
Jack Van Impe, the mad bomber. I am religious. I am of the Lord. And you're going to be wiped out. See? So you can do this, see? All of a sudden, you know, your spirit is high. You're close to God. You're one with God. And now you set yourself aside. Watch what happens here. You're speaking about the downfall of the outside. You're speaking about the downfall of the world, aren't you? Because you've read it in the book. You know, what the heck? You read about Armageddon. The priest said, this guy's made millions of dollars with writing books about Armageddon. You can go in a Christian bookstore and half of the books are about doomsdays, about, you know, monsters are coming and bombs are going to blow up. And they can't wait. And you know what? They're just like Jonah. They're getting ticked off because it ain't happening. Hey, what's this thing about the Russians not being communists no more? I mean, hey, wait. What's going on here? Oh, don't worry, something will happen. You hear them talking on TV. Oh, don't worry. Don't worry, destruction's coming. Destruction's coming. Because they're all religious, see? That's what you got to be careful of. Look what it says in verse 5 of Jonah chapter 3. And so the people of Nineveh believed God. And they put on a fast, see? This is your own mind now. You've come to the point of total conviction, and there's a repentance, there's a change. See? Look what it says in verse 7. Let neither man nor beast nor take drink or nothing within the self from the earth. Take no thought. Separate from thought. All of these things. Then it says in verse 10. And God saw their works, and they turned from their evil, and God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them. And he didn't do it. Oh! He didn't do it. Do you think it's possible that maybe Armageddon won't come after all? Do you think maybe it's possible that in this new age, as people reach out in love and peace and coming into communion with Jesus and Buddha, that there may be a repentance, and he may not? But the religious will not stand for that. If he said he's going to do it, he's going to blow him up. He's going to blow him up. See, this is an Eastern drama we're seeing here. We're looking for the power lower mind to be destroyed. But now that we've found the higher mind, but look what happened. Now, this is what I'm trying to get through to you. Watch here. Look at Jonah chapter 4, verse 1. But it displeased Jonah, and he was very angry. I want an Armageddon. I want these people to be wiped out because they're not like me. They're not saved. I'm saved. They're not. So bring your fire and brimstone and wipe them out, like you said. Let's go. See? I don't want none of this communism to stop. I don't want none. I want an Armageddon, a tribulation. I want all of this stuff. My whole life's depending on this. So then he says in verse 3, he gets, hey, what the heck is this? So now why don't you kill me? It's better for me to die than to live because I'm not getting my way. I'm not getting my way. So Jonah's very, very angry. I thought all would be well, you know, now I'm saved, I'm sanctified, I'm filled, you know, and I'm totally consumed. But, you know, I'm continuing maybe to experience the lower, and look at these people I've got to live with. So I'm setting my, and look what he does. Look what he does. Huh? Look what he does. In verse 5, Jonah went out of the city and sat on the east side of the city and made him a booth, sat under it in the shadow, so he could see what would become of the city. I'm going to sit here in all of my holiness. I got my Bible, and I'm going to watch and wait for you people to fry. Come on, God, drop the bombs. Do you see what he did? Do you see any difference? Do you see any difference from those who write today talking about this thing that we call God, which is supposed to be love and peace, is up there plotting a nuclear holocaust called Armageddon, and it is coming down, and the Russians going to attack Israel, and all of this bizarre stuff? There's no difference here, is it? And look where he's sitting. He's sitting on the east side. He's sitting at the place of holiness, and he's looking at about all of those fakaktas waiting for them to all get flushed down the drain so he can be raptured into heaven. And that's what he's doing. And it says the Lord God prepared, see verse 6, Jonah, the Lord God prepared a gourd and made it to come up over Jonah that it might be a shadow over his head. You know what a gourd is? Some kind of a plant. Whatever the heck it is. But now watch very carefully what you're seeing here, because you're seeing something very beautiful. You, though you are totally consumed in the Spirit and totally consumed in meditation, are still a human being. And here then, to protect Jonah from the heat, the gourd comes and sits over his head. So Jonah was very happy. Hey, I'm saved. Boy, God worked all of this out. The Lord spoke to me today and said a gourd's coming up, and I just feel great about the whole thing. I got my gourd. The heck with you. Sit in the sun, you old bum. I got my gourd because I'm saved. See, it says here, got the gourd. But look what happened in verse 7. But God prepared a worm, and the next day, and it killed the gourd. Huh? What happened? Even, you know, I mean, you see, the point being, I'm still in this. I'm still a part of this life. I'm still a part of this world. I'm still a part of the things that happen according to divine law. And if I think I can sit over, on the east side at the right side and look and wait for destruction to come onto the world like Christianity does. And so this is the point that I want to show you something, and I want you to be very careful, and I want you to listen very closely to it, okay? So God said to Jonah in verse 9, does you well to be angry for the good? In other words, are you upset about this? Are you upset because you're holier than thou? You've got a Bible big enough to choke a mule. You go to the Sunday schools. You go to the Bible studies. You're a friend of the pastor. You never miss church. And yet something here is all screwed up for you because it's not happening the way the book says. And you're ticked off, aren't you? You're upset because this gourd, this thing that was protecting you. And Jonah says, yeah, I am angry. Even unto death I'm angry. Because it's not coming out the way you said it was going to come out. And then this is what the Lord said. You've had pity on the gourd for which you have not labored. You didn't do anything to make that come. You didn't make that thing grow. All you did was take advantage of it. You had nothing to do with it. It came up in the night and it perished in the night. What's the difference? That's the way things are. You don't wave your hands. You don't lay hands on gourds. You don't lay hands on anything and make things happen. I do. You're part of the system. You're part of the earth. You're part of the nature. And if you'll flow with nature, you'll know that the sun will shine and the rains will come and the winds will blow and the calm will be there. It's all part of it. And you've got to be part of it. And you've got to flow in the harmony of these things. And then he said, and you're upset because of that. Then shouldn't I be upset, verse 11, and spare Nineveh, the great city, where more than 600,000, that's, that's 12, perfection. 600,000 persons, now watch this one, folks, that cannot discern between their right hand and their left. And also much cattle, which is the lower beast. You know what God just said in here? I'm not throwing anybody in the toilet. I'm not dropping Armageddons on anybody. I'll straighten everybody out that wants to be straightened out. Everybody that will dip themselves in this ocean, you'll get saved. But don't you look down your nose at anybody else outside because they don't know the left side from the right side. But I'm going to stay with them, and they're going to keep trying until they do know the left side from the right side, and nobody's going to get lost. There's going to be no destruction. There's going to be no Armageddons. There's going to be no hell, because eventually every single human being is going to know the left from the right and is going to walk upon this earth. Only the earth will no longer be called the planet Earth. It will be called the planet Heaven. And Christ will live and reign forever because people will walk with Christ consciousness. Nobody is going to go under. Nobody is going to be lost, whether they choose Jesus or they don't choose Jesus, whether they say this chord or don't say that chord, because God repents and said, wow, 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 I want to get everyone into that holy deep sea. And eventually they will be. And so he says to the religious, and he says to the born-agains, and he says to us who think we're pompous, just forget about it. You just get in and do your work, and I'm going to do mine. And I'll just forgive everybody. And I'm not going to get mad at nobody. And nobody's going to get hurt, nobody's going to get bombed. And if you don't like it, so there. I think, to me, when I got to the end of that story, I was so excited because I saw the pompous religious person sitting at the east side in the holy place waiting for the rest of everybody else to be destroyed. And God said, I don't destroy people who don't know their left from their right. I don't destroy people who don't know their left from their right. Yes, sir?
Sounds like Jonah misinterpreted his...
Wait a minute. Yes, sir?
Sounds like Jonah had a little misinterpretation of his salvation there for a while.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just a mythological story that we all do.
Right.
That we
And
all do.
the ones who preach the end, the only end that comes is usually their own.
That's right.
You know?
And that's what's being said here, and that's the beautiful part of the story. And you know, I may have differences. We all have differences, but the point is that eventually everyone will become aware of their left from their right. And as Al said before when we begun this, if they can't understand it from Jesus about meditation, they'll learn it from a doctor. It doesn't make any difference where they get it from. They get it. That's the important part. So that's good. And we conclude Jonah and the whale, man overboard. And what are we doing tonight?